lay out a hypothesis so you can expand upon it or correct me, but is it fair to say that most governments in human history have had a default assumption of prohibition? Governments can do whatever they want, and citizens don't have rights unless governments proactively give them rights. The default assumption is you don't have freedom of religion in most governments across.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. It's Wednesday, October 14th. I'm Tudor Dixon here with Steve Gruber, and you are watching continuing coverage on Real America's Voice of the confirmation hearing for Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
And standing by outside, our own Ben Berquam and Will Johnson have been out there talking to supporters of the judge in the streets for the last few hours. Let's go to them now and see what they have found out along the way.
Thanks, Stephen Tudor. We're out here in front of the Supreme Court, day 3, and we've got the Young Women for Life. What is the official? Students for Life.
Yeah, we're the SCOTUS Squad is what we like to call ourselves.
The SCOTUS Squad, and with the chant,
"We are the pro-life generation!"
I love it. I love it. I love it. So why, ladies, we'll go around. You're all from different parts of the country. We've got Washington, Texas, Virginia, and North Carolina, and then all in their 20s. Why is it that you are, we'll start over here and kind of jump back and forth, pro-life?
Because I believe in science, and science says that life begets at conception, which means from the moment of conception, that's a human being. And I think that all human beings at least deserve the right to life. And so I think that that's why we're so outspoken, is because we know abortion is killing an innocent human being.
Yes.
And I believe that we have to have a concrete time to define when life begins. And we know through science that life begins at conception. And if we start deciding on our own when life begins, then it will be a slippery slope. And who knows, hundreds of years from now, when they say that killing a human being will be okay. Also, too, last thing, the Constitution gives us the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So if we're killing people in the womb, then they don't have the life that they're guaranteed.
That's beautiful.
I just think that every human being is valuable and they deserve their right to live.
And that women deserve better than abortion.
I love that.
I'm pro-life because I believe abortion is the greatest atrocity of our time. The legal dismemberment, suctioning, poisoning, starvation of preborn humans is horrific and should not be legal.
Wow, that hits home right there, because that's exactly what takes place when the baby's born. And even in Virginia, the governor there was saying, wrap them in a blanket, put them on the table, and make sure they're comfortable, but starve them to death.
It's evil. It's just evil. And the point you make about, and both of you, about this being a discrimination against women, this whole new generation, we've heard this for years from the feminist movement, really, which is the anti-man, anti-baby movement, which is what it's anti-God movement, which is what it's become. Now we're having young women out here saying that they're pro-life, proud of it, and it is a feminist ideal to protect the life. I mean, if there's nothing else, that miracle of that child inside of you, it's incredible.
Yeah. And I think, too, that the reason that these feminists, they're going out there and they're saying, well, we need abortion. And I think that really is ironic coming from a woman, because essentially what fundamentally that's saying is women need abortion in order to be successful. And I think that's why they hate Amy Coney Barrett so much, because she shatters that stereotype to say, actually, we don't need abortion to be successful. We don't have to compromise our career for our children or our children for our career. Women are strong enough to do it all, and Amy Coney Barrett proves that. I think that she is the best representative of what a true feminist should be.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Back to you.
And before we head back to the hearing, Lara Trump had some special guests on her podcast over the weekend. We want to share that with you.
We're so excited to have you join us for our second Sunday in a row of A Prayer for America. I want to introduce our special guest this afternoon, the President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Well, Laura, thank you very much, and it's an honor to be with everybody, and I want to personally thank everybody for the millions of prayers, and everybody's been praying, and this year is a year that our nation's endured just a great trial, and I want to give my warmest sympathies to the families that have lost someone, and I've lost many friends. I've lost 5 friends, and we know that God hears our prayers. We have no doubt about it. He's always with us, and he'll always help us to overcome this challenge. I want to just thank everybody. I want to thank God for working miracles, and I ask God for the wisdom and the grace to continue to lead our country. and to lead it at the top level. We're going to make America greater than ever before. You have been incredible friends. The relationship that I've had with you has been inspirational to everybody.
I love you, appreciate you. I've known you a very long time, and you are a great man. Keep fighting the good fight. It's a good fight. It's a battle. We all have to fight. We all have to press through. We all have to endure so many different things, but God has chosen you for this time, this season.
I am so grateful for you. I'm so proud of you. You really have proven that you know wisdom comes from above, and you want it, and you want what is best for every American.
The Word of God is the most powerful thing that I could share with you today, those of you that are watching, and also for our president. Psalms 23:4, of course, that's from the 23rd Psalm, says, "Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me." And then my favorite verse of all, 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind."
Heavenly Father, we gather in the name that is above every other name. We gather first and foremost as children of Almighty God, created in the image of God, grounded in the Word of God, driven by the love of God, filled with the truth of God. And we gather with the full understanding that while we are waiting for Jesus to come down, Jesus is waiting for his church to stand up.
God, I say thank you right now. Thank you for healing our President and First Lady. Whisper in our heart by your sweet voice and tenderness. For you said that your mercies are new every single day. So I just thank you for mercy and for grace covering our President, covering this nation, covering the First Family, covering everyone who is in a position of authority, who is standing in righteousness for you, oh God.
I just want to thank everybody. Laura, I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody on the line. So many of my friends and people that I have great respect for, people of faith, and I really appreciate it very much. And I look forward to seeing you all soon, and get out and vote. Let's make this even greater than 2016. It's more important than 2016. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Always good to hear from the president. There he is. We are now going to return to continuing live coverage of the Senate confirmation hearings of Judge Amy Coney Barrett here on Real America's Voice. Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse is on the clock.
Cheat. They steal signs. They bang on cans. They've done a whole bunch of miserable things historically, and they deserve to be punished probably more than they have been. But tonight is Game 4.
Thank goodness the First Amendment protects that right for him to express that erroneous opinion.
If you want to defend cheating, that is certainly the prerogative of the senior senator. And the junior senator from Texas now rushes into the room to do some homerism.
It was going so well.
I noticed that Ted is wearing a Lone Star State flag, but not an Astros mask. Tonight is Game 4 in the American League Championship Series, and if Houston loses to Tampa, they will be done. And that leads people to feel kind of desperate at times, right? There are times when you have a game that's your elimination game. You can imagine people wanting to sort of reconsider anything they can reconsider. The ends might justify the means. And you could imagine that the Houston Astros, who've cheated in lots of ways in the past with sign stealing, might try to go to the umpire and try to persuade somebody to expand the strike zone just for Houston in the game tonight. That would obviously be inappropriate, right?
Right.
We can't have two sets of rules. Well, I think that an umpire is obviously supposed to apply rules fairly to both teams. I think we can all agree on that as rules of fair play. And I think some of what we've seen in the questions over the last 3 days are trying to get an umpire to commit to a different set of rules for different teams. And so for what it's worth, just to reiterate what I think so many of us have been trying to argue for in these hearings is the alleged equivalency between Republican and Democratic questioning here implies that Republicans have been trying to get you to pre-commit to certain policy outcomes. And I just don't think that that's actually what's been happening in this hearing. I think that the originalism that you've defended and that a lot of us have been advocating for in advance of and during this hearing is not a request for Republican policy positions to be advocated through the courts. It is rather a plea, not just to you and to future nominees, but to our Democratic colleagues as well, to embrace a system where we again distinguish for the American people between the two political branches and the apolitical branch. The fact that you are before us to be confirmed to a lifetime appointment where you will put on a black robe is a liturgical act where you're cloaking your policy preferences in humility. It is obviously the case that we're all shaped by life experiences. It is obviously the case that people have lived in communities in the past, and most people who end up as extraordinary jurists have been connected to or around the political process at different points in their career. But that is not to undermine the ideals we have in the American system, that judges should not see themselves as super legislators. They should not see themselves as policy advocates. And they do have to take up this new oath to a greater humility. And it means that you lay down certain freedoms that are inalienably and innately yours prior to becoming a judge, so that you don't have the appearance of bias and impropriety in the future. And so I want to reassert the idea that we should be trying to excise from our language this idea of conservative and liberal blocs on the court, Republican and Democrat justices. What we want, and I want this to not just be a Republican aspiration, but I want it to be a Democratic aspiration as well again. What we want are people on the court who understand with humility and modesty, the judicial role, because it is a limited role. It is not a role to right all wrongs in society. It is not a role to be a policy advocate. And I think you've comported yourself extraordinarily well over the last 3 days, as you've been repeatedly asked to be an umpire who prejudges certain cases, and it isn't your job to do that until the reactive moment when you're actually on the court. So thank you for the civics lesson that you've offered Americans over the last 3 days. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Mr. Chairman? Yes. Here we go. Mr. Chairman, I was tempted to make a parliamentary inquiry if the unjustified broadside from the senator from Nebraska violates Rule 19 of this body. But I decided not to when I came to the realization that Nebraska lacks a professional baseball team and at times doesn't always have a winning football team either. And so I view it more as a plea for help than a substantive point. And I will say the remainder of the senator from Nebraska's questions and exchange with Judge Barrett I thought was excellent and a wonderful civic education for all Americans. The scurrilous lies about the Astros, I think, should be stricken from the record and forgotten by all.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I will later be asking unanimous consent to submit to the record a little bit of historical information about the Houston Astros, but we will wait for now. Thank you.
Can't wait.
Will you include a photograph of the World Series trophy?
There you go.
I think there's an asterisk hanging over the trophy.
Well, number one, I want to thank Judge Barrett for not interrupting us during your hearing. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Judge. Good to be talking with you again. These questions of fairness and who follows the rules and who are the umpires and do we win at all costs or do we respect the traditions of the game are essentially what's before us. So let's get to it with the 20 minutes we have. And thank you again to your family and everyone who's traveled with you today. Judge Barrett, in accepting President Trump's nomination to the Supreme Court, you stated you share the judicial philosophy of Justice Scalia, your mentor, the justice for whom you clerked. His philosophy is, of course, originalism. Essentially, the idea that the authoritative meaning of the Constitution is what it meant when ratified, whether that was 150 years ago, 240 years ago, but meant when ratified. And I think the American people need to better understand what that originalist philosophy could really mean for their everyday lives, because I think it means our entire modern understanding of certain constitutional commitments around liberty, privacy, and equality under the law could in fact be rolled back to 19th or even 18th century understandings in a way recognizable to most Americans. Many of these modern notions are rooted in a landmark case decided in 1965, Griswold versus Connecticut, where the Supreme Court held married couples have the right to use contraceptives in the privacy of their own home. In an interview just 8 years ago in 2012 on Fox News, Justice Scalia said this decision was wrong because under his originalist philosophy, there's no such thing as a general right to privacy in the Constitution. This is a question most currently serving justices have answered. When we spoke on the phone last week, you said you couldn't think of any specific issue of law where you disagreed with Justice Scalia. Do you agree with him that Griswold was wrongly decided, and thus states should be able to make it illegal to use contraceptives if they so chose?
Well, Senator, as I've said a number of times, I can't express a view, yes or no, A+ or F. In my other capacity, I get to grade, but not in this particular capacity with respect to precedent. I think that Griswold is very, 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 very unlikely to go anywhere. In order for Griswold to be overruled, you or a state legislature would have to pass a law prohibiting the use of birth control, which seems, shockingly unlikely. Right. And then a lower court would have to buck Supreme Court precedent and say, we're not following Griswold. Again, seems very unlikely. So I think that it's an academic question that wouldn't arise, but it's something that I can't opine on, particularly because it does lie at the base of substantive due process doctrine, which is something that continues to be litigated in courts today.
Well, just for the benefit of those watching, Judge Barrett, as I think you well know, your predecessors talked about Griswold in detail. Chief Justice Roberts said he agreed with the Griswold court's conclusion. He shared your view that he's comfortable commenting because it doesn't appear to be an area that would ever come before the court. Justice Alito, Justice Kavanaugh said essentially the same thing, that they'd agreed. In fact, Justice Kagan, who you've been citing on the no grading, said, I do, that she's willing to speak to it. And as every nominee has, I do support the result in Griswold. I understand that you're saying to us you're going to be your own justice and that you're very hesitant to talk about this case because it is an anchor to substantive due process. But let me just one more time say, are you unwilling to say, as so many currently serving justices have, that at least Griswold is not wrong?
I think Griswold isn't going anywhere unless you plan to pass a law prohibiting couples or all people from using birth control. And I think the question, because it's entirely academic, because it seems unthinkable that any legislature would pass such a law, I think the only reason that it's even worth asking that question is to lay a predicate for whether Roe was rightly decided, because Griswold does lie at the foundation of that line of precedent. Right. So because Griswold involves substantive due process, an area that remains one subject to litigation all over the country, I don't think it's an issue, a case that I can opine on, but nor do I think Griswold is in danger of going anywhere.
Well, and to be clear about what it underlies, it's not just that Griswold was a landmark case, as you well know. It anchors a lot of modern liberty interests in personal and family autonomy. It was extended to unmarried couples in Eisenstadt. It was extended to the right for women to control the reproductive choices in Roe and in Casey. But it was also extended to support same-sex couple intimacy in Lawrence v. Texas, and ultimately that same-sex couples have an equal right to marry in Obergefell. The reason I'm taking a few minutes with this is that Justice Scalia publicly disagreed with or dissented in each and every one of these cases. He wrote in one of these decisions that it reflected the court adopting the so-called homosexual agenda. And just last week, Justices Thomas and Alito issued an opinion stating the Supreme Court needs to fix problems from its holding in Obergefell. So I understand you'll be your own justice, and Justice Scalia's philosophy is significant, but I also think you've made it clear that it's largely your philosophy, and I'm trying to help viewers understand what it means to replace a Justice Ginsburg with someone who may more closely follow Justice Scalia's approach. If Justice Scalia had had his way, we'd be in a very different country with regards to gender discrimination. In one of Justice Ginsburg's most celebrated decisions in 1996, in the case involving Virginia Military Institute, she struck down their male-only admissions policy. Decades later, VMI honored Justice Ginsburg in recognition of the contributions its female alumni have made. Justice Scalia was the sole dissenter in that case and even accused the court of destroying VMI, which remains standing and strong to this day. Now, I'm just getting at how closely you would ally yourself with Justice Scalia's jurisprudence. Would you agree with Justice Scalia that Justice Ginsburg's decision in VMI was wrong?
Well, Senator Coons, to be clear, as I said, I think in response to this question yesterday, I do share Justice Scalia's approach to text, originalism and textualism. But in the litany of cases that you've just identified, the particular votes that he cast are a different question of whether I would agree with the way that he applied those principles in particular cases. And I've already said, and I hope that you aren't suggesting that I don't have my own mind or that I couldn't think independently or that I would just decide, like, oh, let me see what Justice Scalia has said about this in the past, because I assure you I have my own mind. But everything that he said is not necessarily what I would agree with or what I would do if I were Justice Barrett. That was Justice Scalia. So I share his philosophy, but I've never said that I would always reach the same outcome as he did.
Understood. But I think a case like this is a striking example of what it might mean to replace Justice Ginsburg and her methodology and her approach with someone much closer to Justice Scalia. And frankly, to me, this comes back in part to the president who nominated you. President Trump did not nominate you to carry on Justice Ginsburg's legacy. He nominated you because he wants to undermine or change or shift that legacy. And he's been very clear repeatedly before you were chosen about his intent to nominate justices in the mold of Justice Scalia. You recognized yesterday in an exchange with Senator Leahy that replacing Justice Scalia with Justice Garland, had Judge Garland become Justice Garland, would have changed the balance of the court. It's something you wrote about in 2013 in the Texas Law Review. You recognize these balance shifts are why Supreme Court nominations are so much at issue in presidential elections. Do you just acknowledge that your confirmation, even though you won't be identical to Justice Scalia, will profoundly impact the balance of the court and the way in which it decides future cases?
I think the statement that I was having an interchange with Senator Leahy about yesterday was about an interview that I gave shortly after Justice Scalia's death, but after Judge Garland's nomination. And I did say that, use that phrase, lateral move. And what I meant by that, I very much agree with Senator Sasse that we shouldn't talk about Republican judges and Democratic judges because I think there are just judges. But of course it's true that judges have differences in judicial philosophy. So I actually think Justice Breyer and Justice Scalia are a great example of this because they sometimes had public debates with Justice Scalia advocating originalism and Justice Breyer advocating active liberty. And there's room on the court for that, for having different approaches. It's not about having, your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, all of you in the room have different policy platforms, but judges don't have policy platforms, but it is certainly the case that judges take different approaches to interpreting the text. And that is what I meant when I was describing how the balance of the court would shift. It would be away from one balance and toward another in terms of how judges think about the text.
And Judge, what I want to explore with you in the time I have remaining is exactly how those shifts in methodology, in approach, may well have a dramatic impact on the policy outcomes, on what is and isn't upheld as law going forward. On the board behind me, I've asked my team if we would just go back and look at cases. All of these cases listed, it's roughly 120, have something in common. Justice Ginsburg was in the majority, Justice Scalia was in the minority dissenting. And these are cases that touch on nearly every aspect of modern American life. I've talked a lot yesterday about health care and the Affordable Care Act. Yes, that's on there. A number of my colleagues have talked about some other areas. But what's striking is if you just look at what a 5-4 balance towards this methodology means if changed towards a 5-4 balance to this methodology, it has huge consequences for education, for consumer rights, for access to the courts, for civil rights, for immigration, for environmental protection, for Native American rights, for workers' rights, for elections, for executive power, for reproductive rights, for free speech, civil justice, economic development, privacy, government misconduct, prisoner rights, capital punishment, gun safety, and criminal justice. In each and every one of these cases, if Justice Ginsburg had been replaced by a justice with the same core methodological approach and view of the law and decision-making, you can't predict exactly how the case would have turned out, but in virtually every case, it would have moved in a different direction, and in a direction much closer to Scalia's philosophy and farther away from Justice Ginsburg. And that's why I think your views on precedent matter, and we should take a few minutes and go through them. It's something you've written about at length and where you're quite well grounded. The precedents of the court, which is what these 120 cases are precedents upon which litigants, the average American, should be able to rely. And that's that whole issue about whether justices are simply umpires calling balls and strikes or whether there is some agenda. My concern is that a leading scholar in the field of constitutional law has recently reviewed your writings and concluded that you demonstrate an extreme willingness and even radical willingness to revisit settled precedents. Some characterize you as more extreme than Justice Scalia in your approach to precedent and closer to Justice Thomas. The Supreme Court has long held, as you well know, that overturning precedent, a settled case, requires a special justification or strong grounds. But in a 2003 article in the University of Colorado Law Review, you wrote, and I'm quoting, and I think I'll get a chart here in a second that has this quote, "Generally speaking, if a litigant demonstrates a prior decision clearly misinterprets the statutory or constitutional provision it purports to interpret, the court should overrule the precedent." What I see missing from this text and the broader context around it was anything about needing a special justification to overturn settled law or anything about the other factors the Supreme Court typically requires. You seem to be saying a judge should overrule any precedent as long as she thinks it's clearly wrong. If that's your view, and I think from this text it is, it basically means any precedent is at risk where your originalist view of the Constitution or textualist view of the statute says it's clearly wrong. Do you stand by this statement?
Senator Coons, that statement was talking about the courts of appeal. I believe that statement was about the due process clause, and as you probably stretch back from your lawyer days, remember the principles of issue preclusion and claim preclusion. Right. And that article was about how in the courts of appeals it had a very rigid rule that one panel couldn't overrule another, that those rigid rules in the courts of appeal were inconsistent or in tension with some of the court's issue and claim preclusion doctrine. So it wasn't about normal functioning of precedent, especially at the Supreme Court where there are no such rules. And I'll point out that the article was about circuit courts and courts of appeal, and in my time on the Seventh Circuit, I don't think there's any evidence that I've been unwilling to follow or apply circuit precedent. As for this scholar criticizing me as a radical on stare decisis, I'm not sure who it was or the substance of the criticism, but I'm very surprised because I think it was my conversation with Senator Feinstein earlier. I explained that the article, which many people have plucked a sentence from, the Texas Law Review article, was a defense of the Supreme Court's approach to constitutional stare decisis.
If we can, let's move to that quote, because your words weren't just limited to this context, to talking about individual litigants versus how issue preclusion works. It was a novel analysis, the 2003 article, something I hadn't thought of about how stare decisis impacts an individual litigant. But in this 2013 University of Texas Law Review article, which has also been referenced today, you wrote, and I'm quoting, "It's more legitimate for a justice to enforce her best understanding of the Constitution rather than a precedent she thinks clearly in conflict with it." Again, you're saying that if a Supreme Court justice thinks a prior ruling was clearly wrong, she should disregard precedent with which she disagrees, regardless of the typical balancing factors.
Senator Coons, with respect, as I explained this morning, that sentence has been plucked out of the article to kind of, I think, create a misimpression about the context. The whole article discussed reliance interests, discussed the reasons for stare decisis, and emphasized that courts ought not disrupt settled precedent absent very good reason to do so, reliance interests being one. And I think that no one on the court, or even no one in this room, would think that the court ought never revisit its precedent. As I was mentioning, maybe it was to Senator Leahy earlier, you know, Bowers versus Hardwick held that certain sexual conduct between same-sex partners was illegal. It was criminalized. And then Lawrence versus Texas overruled that. And my guess is that you think Lawrence versus Texas was correctly decided. So I don't think, Senator Coates, that your position would be that no precedent should ever be revisited.
Correct. I do think in grievously wrong cases, it is appropriate to reach back, as a number of members have discussed around Brown versus Board and Plessy, and I did note that exchange earlier. But in terms of reliance interests and the significance of reliance interest, in reading that 2003 Colorado Law Review article, you wrote that reliance should count much less, if at all, when a litigant convinces a court that precedent conflicts with the statutory or constitutional provision it purports to interpret. I was struck by that language because I know you choose your words carefully. You've acknowledged reliance interests exist and they're part of the Supreme Court and its approach. But in this article, it seems to me you're giving your own views about whether reliance should matter. And you're unequivocally stating it shouldn't. It should matter less, if at all, when the originalist approach to reading the Constitution says this is wrongly decided. That's why, to me, the concern about reading the Constitution through a Scalia lens rather than a quite different, methodologically, Ginsburg lens. You've also recognized originalists like yourself are more likely to overturn precedent. In the Texas Law Review article, you cited statistics that self-identified originalists like Scalia and Thomas urged and joined in overruling precedents more than any other justices over an 11-year period. The disturbing picture to me overall about all of this, about precedent, is that I think there's been a movement amongst originalists and a change in terms of the approach of judges to judging who self-identify as originalists. In the 2017 article in the University of Minnesota, in Constitutional Commentary, that's been referenced before, you said, and I'm quoting, about modern originalists, that they've abandoned the claim one should be an originalist because originalism produces more restrained judges. Do you stand by that characterization?
Well, Senator Coons, I just want to point out that in this whole discussion, you know, I did write that Colorado article in 2003. I don't recall that sentence or its context, but in my full body of work, including everything that's come before, including the 2013 Texas Law Review article, I've written at great length about the virtues of stare decisis and the stability interest it serves. And in my scholarship, I've also talked about other features of the judicial system. Right. And also, I'd like to point out that nothing in my record in the Seventh Circuit shows disrespect for stare decisis. And also, Justice Scalia did observe and follow precedent. It's not like Justice Scalia ever advocated an overthrow of stare decisis. So I just don't think there's any evidence to suggest that I'm in there trying to burn up the 600 volumes of the United States reports that are on the shelf. I don't have an agenda in that regard.
Well, that's so exactly what caused me concern as I looked at Thomas versus Scalia, and which may be more the role model you follow in terms of the application of stare decisis. These quotes jumped off the page. I haven't made a practice of reading 50-page law reviews recently. I don't mean to suggest
recommend it.
they were compelling and well written. But these quotes struck me as clear statements of a view or an intent. And as I've said before, the larger challenge here is not what you've said about your views on cases, but what the president who has nominated you has said about his goals and his objectives for your service on the court. And frankly, my concern about originalism and an activist willingness to reconsider precedent is that in combination, Justice Scalia's views, often expressed in sharply worded, memorable dissents, may make for great academic reading, but I think most Americans don't expect them to become the law of the land. And in a long line of cases, they would overturn well-settled precedent that I think we have all come to expect. So my core concern here, Your Honor, is that your confirmation may launch a new chapter of conservative judicial activism, unlike anything we've seen in decades. And the point of the chart was to just show We've mostly been talking about the Affordable Care Act and privacy-related cases. But if that's true, it could touch virtually every aspect of modern American life. I pray that I'm wrong. I hope that I am. But in my reading of your work, nothing has alleviated my grave concerns that rather than building on Justice Ginsburg's legacy of advancing privacy and equality and justice, I'm concerned, in fact, you will take the court in a very different direction. And so with all due respect, I will be voting against your confirmation, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One brief comment. The 6 super precedent cases, how many were there? 5, 6? I don't know.
Oh, let's see. This is going to be just like when Senator Sasse asked
Well,
me
we
how
know
many
where they're at.
There was Marbury, there's Brown, there's Mapp versus Ohio, there's the civil rights cases.
So just very briefly for the public, and the reason those cases were picked by you, nobody is suggesting in today's world that it's not the Supreme Court's decision to interpret the Constitution, Marbury versus Madison.
That's correct. And to be clear, that list was formulated by other scholars.
Right.
And was referring to it. But
Not
yes,
just your list.
Nobody thinks that Marbury versus Madison and the court's authority to interpret the Constitution.
And nobody in America is wanting to go back to segregation. No legislative body is attempting to do that for a good reason. America does not want that. Nobody in their right mind wants that. The rest of these cases that have been listed as super precedent have that commonality. Overwhelming acceptance, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
As to Roe and Casey and to Heller and to United Citizens, active litigation going on right now today. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Barrett, good to see you again. Are you aware of any active litigation challenging the constitutionality of Griswold versus Connecticut?
I am not.
Are you aware of any litigation in recent decades challenging the constitutionality of Griswold versus Connecticut?
I am not.
Are you aware of any legal movement out there to challenge the constitutionality of Griswold versus Connecticut?
I am not, although Senator Hawley, as I said to Senator Coons, I'm certainly not aware of anybody trying to make the argument that a legislature should prohibit the use of birth control. But as you know, Griswold does lie at the base of the doctrine that very much is challenged in federal court.
Here's my point. I was 7 years old when Judge Robert Bork came before this body. I don't remember any of that. I wasn't watching it as a 7-year-old. But what we saw, I think the legacy of the Bork hearings continue to reverberate. His name has become a verb, the Borking of nominees. I think what we've seen today is an attempted Borking of Judge Amy Barrett. The problem is they don't have anything in your record that they could use to so badly misconstrue, to suggest that you're somehow going to fundamentally change America, that now they have to attribute to you the worst readings and most draconian misinterpretations of Justice Scalia. So we take Scalia's record, we distort that, and then we attribute it to you. So let me just come back to your relationship with Justice Scalia. I was under the impression that you were a different person than Justice Scalia and that you had, in your own words, your own mind. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Is it fair to say that you are an independent woman and an independent jurist and an independent professional and also, by the way, a pretty darn good lawyer, and you'll make up your own mind on the decisions, cases, controversies that come before you to the Supreme Court of the United States? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
I think maybe then we can put to rest this attempt to constantly leverage the worst interpretations of Justice Scalia's philosophy, misrepresentations, and attribute them all to you as if you are the same person. Frankly, I think it is demeaning and insulting. And I'm glad that you pointed that out in response about your independence to the last question. Let me ask you about another set of questions, just briefly, you had this morning. Senator Leahy asked you about the Foreign Emoluments Clause, which is in Article 1, Section 9, Paragraph 8. He asked you whether it was best characterized as an anti-corruption clause. You might remember that in terms of foreign influence and foreign interference. And then he referenced the president and various allegations about foreign influence. Since he asked you about it, and since he asked about foreign influence in government, I think it's only fair that I ask whether, hypothetically speaking, just hypothetically, if there were, let's say, a vice president of the United States who hypothetically had an adult son, who hypothetically worked for a foreign oligarch, who then sold access to his father, the vice president, and his father then intervened in a case to make sure that that oligarch wasn't prosecuted, hypothetically, would that constitute the kind of foreign corruption that the Constitution's concerned about?
I can't answer hypotheticals.
Well, I thought you might say that, and I'm glad you don't and won't, because who knows, that case may come before you. But I think it's a fair set of questions to ask. Let me ask you about something different. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, passed by Congress in 1996. Yesterday, Justice Thomas issued a dissent from a denial of certiorari in a case called the Malwarebytes case. Now, I bet you haven't had a chance to see his.
I was just about to say, please don't ask me about it, Senator Hawley, because I didn't have a chance to read anything.
Well, let me read to you just a few parts of it. It's quite significant, I think. Here's from the opening paragraph. When Congress enacted the statute, meaning Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, most of today's major internet platforms did not exist. And in the 24 years since, we have never interpreted this provision, we meaning the Supreme Court. But many courts have construed the law broadly to confer sweeping immunity on some of the largest companies in the world. He's talking about the big tech companies. And he quite methodically, over 10 pages, goes on to set out the ways in which courts, at the behest of these tech companies, have dramatically rewritten Section 230. Changing its liability standards. He talks about changing the distinction between publisher and distributor liability, changing the immunity shield, changing the narrow liability shield, extending 230 to protect companies from a broad array of traditional product defect claims. He says it's quite a thorough statement. Here's my question to you. You haven't read this. I don't think you've had a Section 230 case.
I haven't.
So in general, not about his dissent from denial, but in general, what are the dangers of the Supreme Court or any court rewriting a statute, departing from the text that Congress or a legislature, a lawmaking body, departing from the text they have written, that has been adopted, presented and adopted? What are the dangers in that if a court departs from that and substitutes its own judgment, whether it's done in one opinion over a series of years?
So as you've posed the question, without respect to Section 230, just in general, the danger of a court doing that is to subvert the will of the people. You represent the people, as has been pointed out over the course of the hearing. Judges are not elected and they have life tenure and can't be voted out of office. So if judges misconstrue statutes or bend them to the judge's idea of what would be good public policy, then it deprives the people of the chance to express the policies that they want through the democratic process.
And the effect can be cumulative, can it? I mean, you can start with a change to the statute, a rewrite of one provision of the statute that then becomes precedent, and then when the court revisits this case later, revisits the issue later, then they expand that and do a little more rewriting, and pretty soon, 5 or 10 or 15 years later, you're with something that has been so heavily blue-penciled, so to speak, that it doesn't bear much resemblance at all to the original statute. I mean, that's a danger of courts continuously substituting their own judgment. Is that fair to say?
That can happen.
So, let me just say, my opinion, not yours, I think it's pretty clear that has happened with Section 230. I think Justice Thomas does an outstanding job here of laying out why that's the case. Let me ask you in a related vein, Justice Holmes, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., said in the famous Lochner case, in his famous dissent in that case, over a century ago, he said the 14th Amendment does not enact Mr. Herbert Spencer's social statics. Do you agree with that statement? Well, what do you think he was getting at with that?
So Justice Holmes' famous dissent in Lochner, which was later the position adopted by the court, is that, courts shouldn't pour their ideas of good economic policy into the 14th Amendment to stand in the way of policies that the legislatures enact, for example, on questions of maximum hours for bakery workers or minimum wages and those kinds of things.
You mentioned economic policy. Talk just a little bit about how a court could substitute its own views on economic policy for those of a law enacting body, of a legislature or of Congress.
Sure. Well, in that era, in the Lochner era, and then we saw it also in the cases that preceded the switch in time, the court was standing in the way, I guess in Lochner itself, in the way of reforms for workers that legislatures were enacting. And so if, say, one had a preference for free trade, or if one had a preference for having no minimum wage or having a minimum wage, to hold such a statute that did the opposite of your policy preference unconstitutional because it didn't comport with your idea of the best economic policy would be to thwart the will of the people without warrant in the Constitution.
Are there dangers in courts acting as, let me preface this by saying most judges are not economists. I suppose some may be, but most judges are not economics experts. Are there dangers in general with courts acting as economic policymakers, deciding economic policy, making economic judgments? I mean, is that something that courts should be wary of as outside their area of expertise?
Well, I am certainly not an economist. I think courts are expert in interpreting law. You know, we've been trained in law schools, and that's what we're good at, and that's what we should stick with.
I raise these concerns, and I raise them in conjunction with Section 230, because it seems to me that in the closely related antitrust context, we have seen over a period of many years courts substitute their economic judgment in many cases for what the words of statutes actually say and what perhaps the fairest interpretation of statutes might actually be. And whether it's Section 230 or the antitrust laws, one effect of this is to see growing concentrations of power in this country economically that I think are very significant threats to the ongoing operation of our democracy, to the basic ability of the people to control the levers both of the economy and of culture and of government. And I'm afraid I think that courts have some role in this in much the way that Justice Thomas suggested in his dissent from denial yesterday. And I think it's hard to ignore it in the antitrust context as well. So I won't ask for your view on this because these are cases, these are issues that you very may well be called upon to weigh in on. I hope that you are. But I hope that you will give these issues consideration and the I think very well taken warning of Justice Holmes in Lochner. I think perhaps that insight has been lost sight of in many cases by both Republican appointees and Democrat appointees over many years on the Supreme Court in a variety of areas. Let me transition to one other area of law that's very important, back to the First Amendment and to the free exercise of religion. You had an interesting free exercise case recently. You were on the panel. You didn't write the decision. This is the Pritzker case. Illinois Republican Party versus Pritzker, decided on September 3rd of this year. So it's quite recent. It was just last month. This is a case in which the governor of the state was sued because, in the words now of the opinion I'm quoting, his executive order relating to COVID lockdowns, quote now, exhibits special solicitude for the free exercise of religion. And the case, in a roundabout way, challenged that special solicitude for churches and religious organizations. You joined the opinion in full. You didn't dissent. Right. Can you say why you joined the opinion and why you think that the content here is right, why the holding is correct?
Sure. So in that case, the Illinois Republican Party said that because the executive order in Illinois had given an exception for the free exercise of religion, for example, so that people could gather at churches or synagogues or mosques, that same special protection had to extend to the Illinois Republican Party and indeed, by logical extension, to everyone, so that the whole order would fall, because religion couldn't be singled out for special treatment, and that right to free speech, free assembly, et cetera, that it was, under First Amendment doctrine, a content-based distinction that could not survive. And what that opinion said about that is that it was permissible for the governor of Illinois to carve out an exception for free exercise, and that doing so didn't compel the government to extend the same protection to everyone. As Judge Wood said, very well in that opinion, trying to accommodate a right explicitly mentioned in the Constitution and the First Amendment did not put the COVID order in jeopardy.
And the opinion is very firm on this point. You quote from the Hosanna Tabor case, which you and I discussed a little bit yesterday, unanimous case from the Supreme Court. This is the opinion quoting from that case. The First Amendment itself gives special solicitude to the rights of religious organizations. That's the Hosanna Tabor case. This opinion that you joined goes on to say there can be no doubt that the First Amendment singles out the free exercise of religion for special treatment. Rather than being a mechanism for expressing views, as the speech, press, assembly, and petition guarantees are, the free exercise clause is content-based, as you just said. The mixture of speech and music and ritual and readings and dress that contribute to the exercise of religions the world over is greater than the sum of its parts. In other words, what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, what I understand the panel to be saying is the free exercise of religion isn't reducible to the free exercise of speech. It isn't reducible to the free exercise of assembly. Those are important rights. Those are also protected by the First Amendment. But the free exercise of religion protects something different and more. It protects the rights of religious people and religious organizations of all backgrounds the world over, but of course in this country, for Americans, it protects them and gives them special solicitude under the First Amendment. Have I got that correct?
Yes, to be clear, I can't take credit for the eloquent language. That was Judge Wood's language on the panel opinion that I did join. Yes, but the point that the panel opinion makes is that the free exercise of religion is singled out for its own protection in the First Amendment rather than being a subset of speech. And the position that the Illinois Republican Party took in that case would have been more putting everything under the speech umbrella.
And why do you think that is an important point of constitutional law? If I could ask you to put on your, I'm not asking you to comment on cases, but if you could put on your constitutional scholar hat, why is it why is it significant that the First Amendment gives special solicitude, as this decision says, as the Supreme Court has repeatedly said, special solicitude to the rights of religious associations, religious believers, religious worship and exercise?
I think that case itself, the Illinois Republican case, shows why the distinction can matter, because as our panel held in that case, the outcome may have been different if we had been treating it solely as a free speech question, because the court has said that content-based distinctions, under the First Amendment get strict scrutiny and it can be hard to satisfy. So the case might have come out differently had it only been speech at issue. The case came out as it did because free exercise was also at issue.
I think in this time when we see many challenges to the rights of religious organizations, their ability to meet freely, and where frankly we see many instances around the country where religious organizations are treated, religious churches, synagogues, mosques are treated less favorably than secular counterparts, whether that's casinos or gyms or liquor stores, you name it. But so many different executives around this country have chosen to single out churches for disfavor, whether it's in the COVID context, which is what this case is about, or another context. I think that the holding of this opinion is very, very significant, and the Supreme Court's doctrine on this line of cases about the rights and the special solicitude, in the court's words, for religious organizations is very, very significant. I'll just conclude by saying, Judge Barrett, that it's been a privilege to get to speak with you these last couple of days. Congratulations to your family and to Jesse, and I think you have been, your answers to these questions have been really, really exceptional. I have been extremely impressed, and I was impressed to begin with. And I just want to put a finer point on something that Senator Sasse said earlier. He said, you exercised your rights of assembly and free exercise and free speech when you were a faculty member. We've talked about that at length in various positions you took, and he pointed out there's nothing wrong with that. You shouldn't be penalized for it. I just want to agree with the chairman that I think there's nothing wrong with confirming to the Supreme Court of the United States a devout Catholic pro-life Christian, and it will be my privilege to vote for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Barrett. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back, Judge Barrett, and to your family as well. I hope you got some rest last night. I think that's true of all of us.
So I did have a glass of wine. I'll tell you that I needed that at the end of the day.
Well, let me just say on that kind of point, you have a right to remain silent. First, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record some letters from the National Council of Jewish Women and 86 Jewish organizations, from gun violence prevention organizations, and from the pro-choice caucus.
Without objection.
Thank you. There are a couple of loose ends that I'd like to clarify from our conversation of yesterday. First of all, in our discussion of the Second Amendment, we both made reference to the Third Circuit and its ruling on whether or not individuals convicted of a crime could possess a firearm. And I think you cited the Third Circuit as supporting the idea that certain felons could possess firearms, if I'm not mistaken.
And I went back and checked that too. And so you're right, it was a splintered decision. And I was thinking of Judge Hardiman's opinion, which was close.
Let's try to correct the sound system. Okay.
I hope my time is restored.
We will protect all of your time. Thank you.
Gentlemen, this is Stephanie in the hearing room. Can you hear me? It seems our entire sound system's down in here.
Steve, they decided to take a short recess, so I wanted to ask you, how do you think that this is going for the judge? You heard her there say that after last night she did have to have a glass of wine. She seems so composed, like she doesn't have a care in the world, because honestly, when you watch her, you know that she knows this stuff inside and out, but I'm sure it is a tough day for anybody. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I needed a glass of wine. Just from watching. I think it's fair that she has one. In fact, I might have had two. I mean, let's be honest, this is exhausting in many ways. It's one partisan speech after another for the Democrats. Same for the Republicans. They just take a different bent. The most interesting comment here in the last few minutes for me was Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. When he said, hypothetically speaking, if the vice president's son is involved in influence peddling, and you heard the question, obviously related to the bombshell report from the New York Post earlier today, that they now have a treasure trove of emails connecting Hunter Biden to the Ukrainians and influence peddling, because apparently they introduced them directly to then Vice President Joe Biden in the anticipation of getting influence. And later, we know, just 8 months after that, Joe Biden famously got rid of the prosecutor in the case and said, if this guy doesn't go, we're not giving you the $1 billion. You've got 6 hours to decide. And son of a gun, the prosecutor got fired. So this is all very interesting, and I thought it was interesting for Senator Josh Hawley to sneak that in. But as far as Amy Coney Barrett goes, I mean, again, yesterday when she held up the notebook to show everybody, I don't need to take notes here. I've got this. She's pretty incredible. She's talented. She's fielding all the questions, and she's calm. I mean, she's just calm. She fields the questions. She says what she can. She says, certain things I can't, even about a vice president and his son, no hypothetical questions can be answered here. So, Tudor, I think that everybody is seeing her for the qualified nominee that she is, although we've already heard several Democrats say they will not be voting for her. But that's strictly partisan. It's not because she's qualified or not qualified. It's because they are afraid that she will not advance in some fashion their partisan orthodoxy.
And I think that's very important for the American people to understand. Here is a qualified woman for a very high position in the land. And these folks are going to vote against her getting this lifetime appointment based on politics. And she has made it very clear that she is an impartial judge. That's not her job. Her job is not to make laws. Her job is not to get involved in politics, and that she can handle this job. This is the job for her. But you have these folks who are saying, we don't care how qualified you are. We don't care if you're a woman. We don't care about any of that. It's all about politics for us.
Yeah, that's all it's about, and it's unfortunate because it was never that way until Robert Bork in 1986. And by the way, I was not 7 years old, as Senator Hawley said. I was a bit older, Tudor. I'll admit it right here to you and to the people listening. And I do remember Ted Kennedy laid out a battle plan to destroy Robert Bork. That was it. He laid out a battle plan to destroy Robert Bork in 1986. 5 years later, we saw what happened to Clarence Thomas. And this is the way it's been ever since, except that I will point out that Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor and others appointed by Democrat presidents have not been treated this way. The most egregious violations of this, Brett Kavanaugh. I mean, how outrageous was it the way that Brett Kavanaugh was treated? Now, right now, it appears quite clearly that Judge Amy Coney Barrett is going to be confirmed. She should be. She's qualified. The calendar notwithstanding, this happens by an elected president, an elected Senate, not in lame duck session, in regular session. And so the complaints by the Democrats that somehow this is court packing, clearly that's a red herring. It's not true. It's not accurate. And they're going to get her through.
Well, I look at what happened with the Kavanaugh hearings and how utterly attacked he was. Obviously, if you look at that, Steve, his demeanor was much different. He was defensive. Actually, people talked about the fact that he was so aggressive in those hearings that he didn't deserve the position. Now, again, he was in a totally different situation where his personal character was being attacked over and over again. But then I take you to yesterday when Senator Hirono asks the judge, have you ever been convicted of sexual assault? Now, this was just all for show. We all know this. Accused. If you don't understand this, you should understand that they've all met with the judge ahead of time. They've had these conversations. Well, personal questions like that.
Hold on, Tudor. They have
they chose not to.
Hirono, Blumenthal, and some of the others, Richard Blumenthal, the senator, and some of the others decided not to meet with Amy Coney Barrett, also for partisan reasons. Mazie Hirono of Hawaii, let's be honest, she's a national embarrassment, if I may be so bold. Asking Amy Coney Barrett in front of her family, in front of her children, if she's ever sexually assaulted anyone or tried to gain favor through sexual, manipulation, however she worded it, that was so far out of line, it was grotesque. But we would expect no less from Mazie Hirono. She is the face of that party in 2020 on the Senate Judiciary Committee. To me, it was appalling that question would be asked in front of her 7 children and her husband, Jesse. I don't know, Tudor. I just found it to be completely beyond the pale.
Well, I think that it comes off as an insulting question when you ask a question that you clearly already know the answer to. This was something that she was already aware that was going to be the answer. Like I said, this was just a show. But I want to take time now to bring in Amanda Head and Jessica Rivera because I want to have a bit of a panel here to talk about what they've seen so far. Jessica, what are you thinking about these hearings and what's your impression of Judge Barrett?
Tudor and Steve, what's interesting is that it's very obvious for anybody, the American people, to see that there is nothing they can attack her on. So what they are doing, and Senator Ted Cruz made it very clear by pointing out that, all the senators had been in person there, present Monday, Tuesday, and today only 2 Democrat senators are present. Because he says they will definitely show up for their questioning time, but they have nothing to attack her on. And so what they can continue to do, and like you guys were talking about, is they're going to bring up Justice Scalia, her former mentor. They're going to bring up his caseworks and try to, I guess, put them on her, where she said today very, very clearly, he was a mentor, nothing more, and she has her own mind. She makes her own decisions, and she has for many years. Obviously, it's worked to her advantage because she is very qualified, if not overqualified, for a Supreme Court seat. In that regard. And then also what they're trying to attack her on is just the idea that they're just making presumptions of what she's possibly going to rule or judge, depending, based basically on her very staunch, strong Catholic faith, which, I mean, we cannot assume anybody's going to judge any differently, whether they are a believer or not a believer. That's not what the person is on being should be questioned about. It should be on their past works. And we can see it's very plain as day that they have nothing. She's very qualified. And to be honest, it's very bipartisan. It's actually not a partisan issue, that if she is not confirmed, the seat simply can't be filled.
Jessica, thank you for that input. It's interesting to me to see that that there are 2 Republicans that have already said that they are going to vote no on this nomination, even though they might believe she's qualified, that being Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Both said they will vote no because of the timetable, which seems unusual to me. But Jessica, you make good points there. They're attacking her using Justice Scalia and anything else they can come up with. Going to California now, our America's Voice correspondent and contributor Amanda Head joining us from California. Amanda, obviously, this is a woman who is the smartest person in the room. When she holds up a blank notebook to say, I don't need notes, not with you clowns. I don't think she said it that way, but it's kind of the way it comes across.
She is most definitely the smartest person in the room. She has been incredibly measured and thoughtful in her responses. Like you pointed out, she needed absolutely no notes. She has had a lot of preparation for this, though, not just judicially, but familially. She's got 7 children, so, no criticism towards her children, but she's used to getting stupid questions. So she has fielded these questions with grace and class. The hullabaloo over her using the term sexual preference. As a lot of you know, I'm involved with gay Republicans and conservatives here in Los Angeles, and nearly every single one of them, including the ones that are surrogates of the Trump campaign, said, well, it is a preference, actually. So we went from her using that term yesterday to Democrats saying that you can't use that, to Twitter blowing up over it and turning into a dumpster fire, to op-ed pieces this morning talking about how offensive it was for Amy Coney Barrett to use that term. As far as Amy Klobuchar and her questioning of her yesterday, when she said, I thought one day that I would be in your seat, but now I'm on the other side questioning. I can't for the life of me. I've worked in political strategy. I've worked on the campaign side of communications. I can't for the life of me understand why she would admit on the floor of the committee hearing in the Senate. Why would she say that? It serves absolutely no purpose. It gives no benefit to her other than just kind of making her look bitter and jealous of a woman who is younger and smarter and more accomplished than she is. It was a complete disaster yesterday for Democrats. Actually, I wouldn't say complete disaster. I think it's going to devolve into a complete disaster. This will be out of committee relatively soon, and then we'll have a vote in the next 2 weeks. And as relatively civil as Democrats have been so far, don't underestimate them. They're not going to be able to resist doing a Brett Kavanaugh light version of what happened in 2018. That's just my opinion. Yeah,
I think it's interesting that Amy Klobuchar thinks she's tracking a deer or something like that. I've been trying to figure out what her whole thing. I'm on the track. Listen, this isn't Minnesota, Senator. You're not in the big woods. Take it easy. And no, you're not a nominee for the Supreme Court. I found that to be a bit appalling as well, Tudor. How did you take that?
You know, I will go again to what I said, that they keep telling her you're taking Judge Ginsburg's seat. No, she's not. There is an open seat on the Supreme Court. I'm sorry, I feel bad about what happened with Justice Ginsburg, but that is not her seat, and we are not replacing that person with the exact same person. That's not how people work. We'll be back with more here on America's Voice Live right after this.
Do you have any idea how your mattress affects your body and how well you sleep? Is it too hard or too soft, causing you to wake up with sore shoulders, back, or hips? Are you uncomfortable because you're too hot or too cold? Now you can get the total body support you need and the better sleep you want with the new MyPillow mattress topper.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell. When I invented my new MyPillow mattress topper, I made it to have everything you'd ever want in a topper. My mattress topper helps give you the support you need, helps relieve your pressure points, and regulates your body temperature for you as an individual. It comes with a 10-year warranty. You can wash and dry the cover. It's made in the USA, and I back it with my 60-day money-back guarantee.
Go to MyPillow.com or call now to get your very own MyPillow mattress topper. Use the promo code and Mike will give you 30% off and 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free. Order now.
MyPillow topper delivers on its promise to give me a better night's sleep.
I can sleep all night through, and it's a miracle for me.
Mike's exclusive 3-layer design starts with a layer of MyPillow foam, providing you superior support and comfort. The second layer of transitional foam evenly distributes body weight and helps relieve uncomfortable pressure points for optimal comfort. Mike's ultra soft outer layer is a patented temperature regulating cover that helps keep you at your ideal sleeping temperature all night long. Unlike other sleep systems costing thousands, the MyPillow mattress topper takes comfort to a whole new level without any wires, remotes, or moving parts. Call now or go to MyPillow.com to order your MyPillow topper. Use the promo code to save 30%. When you do, Mike will give you 2 of his standard MyPillows absolutely free. That's right, 2 standard MyPillows free and 30% off your MyPillow topper today. Order now.
I personally guarantee it's going to change your bed into the most comfortable bed you'll ever own.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
So Frank, you're a big hurt. Why do you need Nugenics? After 40, a guy loses free testosterone. Even me. I couldn't stay in shape like I used to.
Frank. So does Nugenics really work?
Oh yeah, my workouts are incredible now. I'm feeling stronger, more energetic, with a lot more drive.
Frank. So say I knew someone who should try Nugenics. How does he do that?
It's easy. Just send a text to get a complimentary bottle.
Frank's right. Now you can claim a complimentary bottle of award-winning Nugenics by texting BUFF to 42424. Its unique formula is powered by Testofen, a patented key ingredient clinically researched to help a man feel stronger, leaner, more energetic, and more passionate. Text BUFF to 42424 for your complimentary bottle of Nugenics Total T. Plus, text now and we'll include a bottle of new Nugenics Thermo, our most powerful fat incinerator ever, to help you get back into shape fast, absolutely free. That's BUFF to 42424.
America's Voice Live. Thank you for being with us. Steve Gruber and Tudor Dixon. We're keeping an eye on the Senate confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett. Apparently they had some technical issues, Tudor. We know a thing or two about that on television. But I want to share something with you, in case you missed it. Wolf Blitzer yesterday had the nerve to ask a real question of Nancy Pelosi. I mean, how dare him ask a real question of Nancy Pelosi? Her response, however, is frankly bizarre. Listen to this.
Even members of your own caucus, Madam Speaker, want to accept this deal. $1.8 trillion. Congressman Ro Khanna, for example. But let me just quote Ro Khanna, a man you know well. I assume you admire him. He's a Democrat. And he just said this. He said, people in need can't wait until February. $1.8 trillion is significant and more than twice the Obama stimulus. Make a deal. Put the ball in McConnell court. So what do you say to Ro Khanna?
What I say to you is, I don't know why you're always an apologist, and many of your colleagues apologists for the Republican position. Ro Khanna, that's nice. That isn't what we're going to do, and nobody's waiting till February.
Yeah, Ro Khanna, that's nice. Why are you always being an apologist for the Republicans? Wolf Blitzer and CNN apologist for the Republicans. I'm like, wow, Nancy, she needed a glass of wine right there, Tudor, because she is a little bit out of sorts. It's just weird to me. That's all. But I had fun with it. It's something different than the hearings we've been watching. So, what did you think?
Come on, you are tired of CNN just constantly building up Republicans and tearing down the Democrats.
Yeah.
I mean, Don Lemon is almost intolerable with his love for the Republican Party.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Honestly,
he's just hugging on the president.
You know, I say directly to Speaker Pelosi, I wouldn't even go on there anymore. I wouldn't even go on CNN anymore. That is ridiculous. It's hard to take.
So unfair.
But I want to switch gears a little bit here because Joe Biden had something to say to voters the other day. You might want to hear this.
Gallup reported last week 56% of Americans said that they were better off today than they were 4 years ago, would have been under the Obama-Biden administration. So why should people who feel that they are better off today under the Trump administration vote for you?
Well, if they think that, they probably shouldn't. They think 54% of American people are better off economically today than they were in our administration. Well, their memory is not very good, quite frankly.
They're just idiots. They are not smart. They cannot remember anything, Steve, because 54, 56, what was the percentage again? Well,
Whatever
they should not vote for, they shouldn't vote for me.
And I think it's beautiful. He told 56% of Americans, don't vote for me. You know, when it comes to memory, though, I wish I could be like Joe Biden. That way I, too, could forget Mitt Romney. Just thought I'd say that.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
But think of how significant this is. This is a man who just the other day came out for a second time and said he was running for the Senate. This is not a mistake that you make. I mean, honestly, at what point do you have to step back and realistically look at this as his campaign and say, we can't let him out? You know, I think I said to you the other day, this reminds me of that movie 50 First Dates, where every day she woke up and they played her the story of her life so she could know what had happened. And I honestly think somebody in the campaign was like, put less of the Senate run in his life story. Put more presidential stuff in. More presidential stuff. He's forgetting. They're replaying his life story every morning because he doesn't know what he's doing. You do not run for president. You are not 20 days out from your run and say that you're running for Senate. That just doesn't happen.
But it's happened several times. And, of course, he also said yesterday that, you know, he has to challenge in Florida and Ohio because Donald Trump won those places the last two times. The last two times. Maybe it's the Joe Biden of the future. He's been transported back from the future because he knows that Trump wins Florida and Ohio for the second time, which, by the way, I think that would be an accurate prognostication. Well done, Joe of the future. We appreciate you doing that. You're on America's Voice Live. We're standing by as the continuing hearings for Amy Coney Barrett have had a bit of a technical setback, my understanding, some audio issues that they're dealing with. But we can take a look at some of the things that have gone down already during the hearings today. Let's go to Dianne Feinstein. How about that? Impressed after Amy Coney Barrett explained severability to her and everyone else listening.
What do you think of all that?
What do I think of severability, or
in that instance?
I think the doctrine of severability, as it's been described by the court, you know, serves a valuable function of trying not to undo your work when you wouldn't want a court to undo your work. Severability strives to look at a statute as a whole and say, would Congress have considered this provision so vital that kind of in the Jenga game, pulling it out, Congress wouldn't want the statute anymore. So it's designed to effectuate your intent. But, you know, severability is designed to say, well, would Congress still want the statute to stand even with this provision gone? Would Congress have still passed the same statute without it? So I think insofar as it tries to effectuate what Congress would have wanted, it's the court and Congress working hand in hand.
Thank you. That's quite a definition. I'm really impressed. Thank you.
Really impressed. Well, thank you, Senator Feinstein, because your impression and you being impressed, that's all we care about right here. So that's just a bit of a flavor of what's going on today. A lot of it has been, as you know, Tudor, just speeches back and forth. When does White House come back up? I can't wait for his round 2. Yesterday, knocking his things down and talking for 30 minutes and not asking a single question. Well done, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Well done.
No, these are definitely speeches, partisan speeches. We're watching that. But the fact that Feinstein said she was impressed is probably a fact, because let's face it, this woman is impressive. You're watching America's Voice Live. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned to get a free pan from Granite Stone. Stuck on eggs, burnt on batter. You can scrub and scrape, but you can't escape the nightmare of your sticky pans. Introducing the Granite Stone Pan, the all-new durable non-stick pan. No butter or oil needed. Watch, we melted down these sticky candies in Granite Stone, and it just doesn't stick. We cooked a half a dozen eggs, bacon, cheese, and tomato breakfast with no butter or oil, and it just doesn't stick. Look, caramels, chocolate, and cheese. Unreal for any other pan, but not for Granite Stone. It just doesn't stick. Granite Stone will be the last pan you'll ever need because it's pressed from a solid aluminum disc for even heat conduction, then coated 3 times with our durable Granite Stone finish. Granite Stone is metal utensil safe and won't scratch. And talk about non-stick. This salmon cooked skin side down with no added butter or oil just doesn't stick. This steak is perfectly seared, just like the pros. And because Granite Stone is oven rated to 500 degrees, we bake this upside down pan pizza to perfection, and it just doesn't stick. Fire Flambe Delicious Cherries Jubilee. Plus, it's PFOA free and 100% dishwasher safe. Call or go online to get your Granite Stone pan for the special TV discount price of just $19.99. Granite Stone is so durable it comes with a 10-year warranty. And with every order, you're going to get a Granite Stone single-serve egg pan absolutely free. It's the perfect size for personalized eggs, omelets, or frittatas that slide right out. It makes the best bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich quick. Yours absolutely free. We'll even ship your entire order free. That's right, free shipping. You get it all, an incredible value. Here's how to order.
To order, call 1-800-850-0237. That's 1-800-850-0237, or order online at buygranitestone.com. That's 1-800-850-0237. Call now.
This is the kind of card that has America talking. With it, people with Medicare are getting all-in-one coverage for their doctor visits, hospital care, prescription drugs, and more. This kind of insurance, called Medicare Part C, may also cover dental care, eyeglasses, hearing aids, fitness programs, vitamins, even healthy meals and rides to the doctor. With this kind of coverage, you do not need a Medicare supplement insurance plan. You will access your benefits through your Medicare Part C plan for one low and oftentimes $0 monthly plan premium. You deserve to get the most from your Medicare benefits. Call now for free information that may help you get more coverage for less money. There is no obligation to enroll. Whether for yourself or someone you love, call the number on the screen now. Call now.
One thing you have to say about these confirmation hearings, Steve, is that these are educational. This is something in many cases that we should have our children watching, because we're learning a lot about what the different branches of government are and what they mean. Senator Grassley had an interesting question about cameras in the court, and this was Judge Barrett's response.
I understand that the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, where you currently serve, adopted procedures to allow requests for video recording of oral arguments, as well as public release of the recordings.
That's correct.
Has your court had any problems with these procedures? What are your views on allowing cameras in the courtroom? If confirmed, would you keep an open mind about allowing cameras in the Supreme Court?
I would certainly keep an open mind about allowing cameras in the Supreme Court.
Everything, she's so calm. I keep saying she's so measured, but she is also really hard to attack, even though we've seen them try to attack her. Even when people have said, even when these senators have come forward, Steve, and said, well, I'm going to vote no, it's been so calm, and it's really hard to come back at her with any type of criticism. They've really struggled. Some of women have, it seems as though the women have felt more entitled to go after her with a sharp tongue, but still it has no effect on her character whatsoever.
Yeah, you know, I think that I made a short list of things our children could learn from watching. You mentioned our children should watch this. They could learn about cheap shots, posturing, pandering, partisan speech making, all of those things. Controlling the time, not asking real questions, sticking to the talking points. They can learn all those things if they stayed awake through a good part of it. Did I bring up White House again? At any rate, stare decisis is a theme and a theory that's come up time and again, and it always does, because the left wants you to hear about Roe v. Wade all the time, and the Affordable Care Act all the time. They want to make Amy Coney Barrett the boogeyman. She is the devil in disguise when it comes to these things. Millions of parents and people will lose health care. Women will lose the right to an abortion in America. If this woman makes it to the court, America, as you know it, is ruined, and all this other such nonsense. But she did answer a tough question, did Amy Coney Barrett, about precedent, about stare decisis. Listen to this.
Well, Senator, no justice that I'm aware of throughout history has ever maintained the position that overruling a case is never appropriate. As you probably know, there's a Supreme Court case that said that states could criminalize sexual conduct between same-sex couples, and Lawrence versus Texas overruled that case. Plessy versus Ferguson was precedent, and Brown versus the Board of Education overruled it. So the Supreme Court has always said that in some cases, overruling precedent is the right course for the court to take.
So it depends on the case, on a case-by-case basis. And it's also different when a case ends up at the Supreme Court. It's obviously not the case that originally got a ruling in place, like Roe v. Wade. We've seen challenges to abortion restrictions and so forth in Louisiana, elsewhere, struck down by the Supreme Court this year. Gay marriage has become the law of the land under the Supreme Court, including at the time with Justice Neil Gorsuch. So to try to divine what these justices are going to rule once they make it to the bench and try to figure it out, David Souter comes to mind, of course, who turned out to be a great disappointment to conservatives. They thought he was conservative. In the end, he was a champion for liberal causes and an activist Supreme Court. So, trying to divine, like I say, what these jurists will do once they get a seat on the Supreme Court, almost impossible oftentimes.
Well, you definitely have Democrats making this election an election issue, but you have Senator Cruz, who came out and said, I just want people to be clear that even if at some point Roe v. Wade were overturned, that doesn't mean that abortion is immediately illegal and that women have no reproductive health care whatsoever. That just means it goes to a state level. But this is something that Democrats don't want you to hear. Democrats want you to live in fear of Republicans having any control in Washington, and this is a perfect opportunity for them to be on their soapbox saying that. That's why we haven't heard that many questions asked of Judge Barrett. You're watching America's Voice Live. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and as you know, my passion is to help each and every one of you get the best sleep of your life. That's why I created my new Giza Dreams bed sheets. I guarantee you they'll be the most comfortable sheets you'll ever own.
With the Giza Dream Sheets, I'm getting the best sleep of my life.
They are so soft and smooth. I never slept so good.
I fall asleep faster because I'm actually comfortable.
I started by using the world's best cotton called Giza. It's only grown in a region between the Sahara Desert, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Nile River. It's ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable, which is why I can give you my full 10-year warranty. But I didn't stop there. My Giza sheets also include full 21-inch wide pillowcases that will fit over any pillow and deep pocket sheets that will fit over any mattress. I guarantee you the first night you sleep on my sheets, you'll never want to sleep on anything else.
Go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen right now. MyPillow Giza Dream Sheets are available in a variety of colors and will be the softest, most comfortable sheets you will ever own. Use the promo code and get 2 for 1 low price, plus free shipping. Giza dreams are made with the finest, most sought-after cotton in the world. Giza cotton was once reserved for only the finest dress shirts, but is now available in Mike's Giza Dream Sheets. They feature a beautiful silky sateen weave that helps keep you cool and comfortable all night long.
With the Giza Dream Sheets, I'm getting the best rest of my life.
I love my Giza Dream Sheets.
Go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen right now to get your very own MyPillow Giza Dream Sheets. Use the promo code and Mike will give you a very special 2-for-1 low price and free shipping. That's right, get 2 for 1 low price and free shipping. Call or go online now.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
If you're over 50, imagine you could turn back the clock on your stiff, achy joints 10, even 20 years. Imagine you could do this without products that just temporarily hide the symptoms and may have side effects. Imagine no more. Get your complimentary sample of Instaflex Advanced just by texting JOINT to 231231. Instaflex Advanced is different because it targets the root cause of joint soreness and stiffness. It doesn't just cover up symptoms. Instead, it bathes your joints in its unique combination of 5 key natural ingredients found in no other product. Key ingredients backed by 5 clinical studies. Instaflex Advanced is so powerful, you could have better knees in just 1 week. Maybe that's why it's #1 at GNC. But you can only get your complimentary sample by texting JOINT to 231231. Plus, text now and we'll include a tube of Instaflex pain cream with its exclusive oxygenated oil for fast-acting relief from the pain of arthritis, backaches, and sore muscles, absolutely free. Text JOINT to 231231.
You're watching America's Voice live here on Real America's Voice. Steve Gruber and Tudor Dixon were just in a holding pattern, if you will. They had some technical difficulties there at the Senate confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett. These things happen from time to time. They seem to be in the room. We're keeping an eye on it for you to make sure that when the hearings begin again, we can rejoin and have complete live coverage here on Real America's Voice as we have been providing since they began on Monday. Now, a lot of conversation, as we mentioned here for the last few minutes, about Obamacare. It seems that health care is a big conversation for the Democrats. In fact, it's some of their longest pieces of conversation have been pontificating over Obamacare, which is unusual because they're also promoting Medicare for all if they get elected to the White House and the Senate. So it seems to me Obamacare doesn't mean a lot to them, except they're trying to use it here in this confirmation hearing process as a way to win political points and hopefully sway voters come November 3rd or those that are voting right now. Lindsey Graham had a chance to weigh in on this with Amy Coney Barrett. Here's part of that conversation.
Let's talk a little bit about yesterday, Obamacare. This hearing has been more about Obamacare than it has you. Obamacare is on the ballot. If you want socialized single-payer health care, that's on the ballot. Why do many of us object to Obamacare? It was written and passed on a partisan line, I think on Christmas Eve. Most big changes in society have more buy-in than that. You're talking about 1/5 of the American economy. And as I said yesterday, from a South Carolina point of view, this has not worked out well. We started with 5 exchanges. We're down to 1. You have 1 choice. 4 rural hospitals have closed. Premiums have gone up, not down, by an average of 30%. And when you look at the formula used by Obamacare, I can understand why Senator Harris likes it the way it is. I can understand why Chuck Schumer likes it the way it is. 3 states get 35% of all of Obamacare dollars. New York, California, Massachusetts, they're 22% of the population. In South Carolina, if you had a per patient formula, no matter where you lived, you got the same contribution from the federal government, South Carolina would receive almost an additional $1 billion.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Not a question in there, just a lecture about Obamacare and how it worked in South Carolina. You see, it goes both ways. Both sides continue to chew up time in partisan speeches, really. They're on their soapbox. They're telling you what's going on in the world, although it has nothing at all to do with Amy Coney Barrett. Now, does it? Now, she has acquitted herself quite remarkably. I find it sad, really, that Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski said they're going to vote against her just because they don't like the calendar or the way it was put together. To say no to this woman, this overly qualified woman who doesn't even need to take notes when taking on 22 senators in a round robin. Tudor, she's remarkable, and she should be applauded for what she's doing out there, I would think.
Absolutely. Well, when Obamacare didn't work for them, though, Steve, they decided to go to something different. So we have Senator Durbin, who started to lecture the judge on crime in Chicago. He is an Illinois senator. And obviously, we've seen this in Chicago. We see this every weekend. We had a few weekends where things started to get better when the feds went in and helped out with the National Guard. But now we have this last weekend, just this past weekend, we had another, I think, almost 80, maybe 90 people that were shot in Chicago over the weekend. So Senator Durbin is trying to tell the judge that this is happening. Well, it's happening because of Indiana. He came after her and said that these guns are being purchased. We know these guns are being purchased where you live in Indiana. So guns are being purchased legally in Gary, Indiana, and then they're bringing them into Illinois, even though it's not legal to have guns there in Illinois. Now, the fact of the matter is the majority of these guns that are being used in these shootings in Chicago are not legally purchased anywhere. But that aside, he wanted to bring this up. He also wanted to talk about a particular case where one man ended up being charged with a felony, but this came across the judge's desk, and at some point she said that this person should still be allowed to vote, or should still be allowed to own a gun. Now, he's trying to make the argument that she doesn't want felons to vote, but she wants them to have guns. Take a look.
By the very terms of the civic rights argument, then, the right to arms would have been treated differently than things like the right to vote or sit on juries. So here's what it boils down to. After Heller, after the decision, after Scalia's statement, you concluded that any felony can take away your right to vote, but only a violent felony can take away your right to purchase an AK-47. Why?
Senator, with respect, that's distorting my position. What I said in that case, which is what Heller said, and which is conventional in all discussions of this, to my knowledge, is that the right to vote is fundamental. However, it is an individual fundamental right that we possess, but we possess it as part of our civic responsibility for the common good. The same thing is true, for example, of jury service. Whereas individual rights, and this is again a distinction that's drawn in case law, individual rights benefit more the individual. And the entire dispute in Heller was that the majority thought that the Second Amendment was an individual right, and the dissent thought it was one that was a civic right, that was a right that people possessed, but they possessed for the benefit of society by participation in the militia. And it is a distortion of the case to say that I ever said that voting is a second-class right. That's simply not what that passage means.
So he was very much trying to make it seem as though she was going to allow people to have guns, that this was a gun issue, Steve. And obviously, this is clearly a woman with a lot of children, because in a very calm way, she says that's a distortion of it. But this was definitely trying to make a big issue out of guns, Steve.
Oh, it certainly is. Of course, that's what they're trying to do here. It's another one of these partisan speeches trying to say Chicago's gun violence problem should reflect whether or not I should own a gun, or you, Tudor, for that matter. You see, I've always held the position that if a criminal uses a gun to commit a crime somewhere elsewhere, why would that have any impact on my legal right to own a gun? That's my jurisprudence being applied here. And the problem with the Democrats is, as you know from Kamala Harris, who's also on this committee, she's openly called for the confiscation of 10 million firearms or more if she were president. She calls it a gun buyback, but you can't buy things back that you never owned. And so Kamala Harris and Dick Durbin, among others, are very anti-gun. They call themselves common sense gun law people, whatever that means. And this whole notion that Dick Durbin went into also on all this. They go down to Gary, Indiana, and they buy guns, no background check at gun shows. Let me tell you something. That is the biggest red herring of all. Gun shows operate using federal firearm licensed dealers. And by law, those FFL holders must do a NICS background check. It's required by federal law. And trust me, they're not playing games with it, because if they did, they would go to prison. And I don't think they're interested in doing that. So where these guns come from, is not clear. It's complicated. It's not, hey, let's blame the gun shows in Gary, although that's easy for the Democrats to do. At the end of the day, it really doesn't hold much water, and it's not really anchored in facts and truth. Just so you know, Tudor.
No, but it's a good argument to have right now because we have all of these violent riots, and instead of, and this is again strings and mirrors, instead of actually seeing what's really truly going on with the Democrat Party, they're only going to show you what they want you to see. So they're going to say that if we had gun control, these Democrat cities would be safer, even though Democrat cities have the strictest gun control laws of any cities in this entire country, and still they have the violence. We'll be right back after this break.
America's favorite easy on, easy off energy compression socks just got better. Introducing Copperfit Energy Plus, the world's first graduated compression socks with a rich blend of ingredients found in the top moisturizing lotions and creams. These microencapsulated ingredients are infused into the compression fabric and are gradually released and absorbed by your movement. Motion-activated technology designed to hydrate and soften for all-day comfort. The more you move, the more Copperfit Energy Socks delivers.
I'm not thinking about that I have compression socks on. That simple fact that they feel better with them on than with them off makes me love these socks.
Our most advanced copper-infused compression fabric made in FDA-approved manufacturing facilities, woven into our Easy On, Easy Off graduated compression sock to help reduce swelling and discomfort from prolonged sitting or standing.
I feel that soothingness in my calves and in my ankles, but they can make my feet feel good after 300 miles on the road, and they got to be good for anybody else.
Enhanced compression around the arch and ankles for extra support and relief of muscle aches and pains. And a soft, shock-absorbing footbed for all-day comfort.
All that arch pain that I typically have is just relieved. They are super comfortable.
They do the job. They're easy and they're effective. That's the whole point of wearing them.
Commercials always promise, promise, promise. This was something easy to try. Just put on a sock, see if it works. I have to say that I'm a fan.
The first ever Easy On, Easy Off compression socks with hydrating ingredients, worn by thousands of essential workers across the U.S. Order your Energy Plus compression socks online now at GetEnergyPlus.com for only $19.99 or call 1-800-515-8892. Order right now and get a second pair free.
I get compression, I get comfort, all in one sock.
Motorcycle guys appreciate the better technology. This is better technology.
Feel the power of Copperfit.
So Frank, you're the big hurt. Why do you need Nugenics? After 40, a guy loses free testosterone. Even me. I couldn't stay in shape like I used to.
Frank. So does Nugenics really work?
Oh yeah, my workouts are incredible now. I'm feeling stronger, more energetic, with a lot more drive.
Frank. So say I knew someone who should try Nugenics. How does he do that?
It's easy. Just send a text to get a complimentary bottle.
Frank's right. Now you can claim a complimentary bottle of award-winning Nugenics by texting BUFF to 42424. Its unique formula is powered by Testofen, a patented key ingredient clinically researched to help a man feel stronger, leaner, more energetic, and more passionate. Text BUFF to 42424 for your complimentary bottle of Nugenics Total T. Plus, text now and we'll include a bottle of new Nugenics Thermo, our most powerful fat incinerator ever, to help you get back into shape fast, absolutely free. That's BUFF to 42424.
You're watching America's Voice Live, and the confirmation hearing for Judge Amy Coney Barrett has resumed. We're going to go straight to that now.
Brown to Senator Graham is that I do think what I have said in print, either in my scholarly work or in judicial opinions, is fair game. And I have expressly said in the past, in the originalism lecture that I've given repeatedly, that Brown was correctly decided. So I think that was fair game, and Loving is indistinguishable from Brown. It flows directly from it.
Loving involved interracial marriage, and Griswold involves a ban on contraception, criminal ban on the use of contraceptives, which in turn also involves Eisenstadt v. Baird. These are fundamental cases, and I'm asking your legal position. I want you to keep in mind how many people are listening and watching because they may take a message from what you say. They may see what you say and be deterred from using contraceptives, or may feel the fear that it could be banned.
Well, Senator Blumenthal, the position that I've taken is whether a question is easy or hard, that I can't offer an answer to it. And I would be surprised if people were afraid that birth control was about to be criminalized, because I said to Senator Coons,
you may be surprised, but Chief Justice Roberts said, quote, "I agree with the Griswold court's conclusion that marital privacy extends to contraception." Justice Kennedy, if a hypothetical case were to be imagined that better fits within the privacy that I believe the Constitution protects, I couldn't think of a hypothetical better than Griswold. At his hearing, Justice Thomas said, "I believe the approach that Justice Harlan took in Poe v. Ullman and reaffirmed again in Griswold in determining the right to privacy was the appropriate way to go." And he reaffirmed Eisenstadt v. Baird. I'm stunned that you're not willing to say an unequivocal yes, it was correctly decided, I would have been in the majority. Lawrence v. Texas, which held that the government cannot criminalize gay and lesbian relationships. Was it correctly decided?
Senator Blumenthal, I've said throughout the hearing that I can't grade precedent, in the words of Justice Kagan, give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
So you can't give me a yes or no answer. Again, forgive me for interrupting, but my time is limited.
Well, Senator Blumenthal, I can't give a yes or a no, and my declining to give an answer doesn't suggest disagreement or agreement, and it certainly shouldn't suggest that—
I'm asking your legal position, Judge, not your moral position, not a policy position, not a religious faith position, a legal position. Correctly decided, Obergefell versus Hodges.
Senator Blumenthal, every time you ask me a question about whether a case was correctly decided or not, I cannot answer that question because I cannot suggest agreement or disagreement with precedents of the Supreme Court. All of those precedents bind me now as a Seventh Circuit judge, and were I to be confirmed, I would be responsible for applying the law of stare decisis to all of them.
But, Your Honor, think of how you would feel as a gay or lesbian American to hear that you can't answer whether the government can make it a crime for them to have that relationship, whether the government can enable people who are happily married to continue that relationship.
Senator,
think of how you would feel.
Well, Senator, you're implying that I'm poised to say that I want to cast a vote to overrule Obergefell, and I assure you I don't have any agenda, and I'm not even expressing a view in disagreement of Obergefell. You're pushing me to try to violate the judicial canons of ethics and to offer advisory opinions, and I won't do that.
Judge, you yourself wrote in 2016 an article that you co-wrote with John Nagel. It's called Congressional Originalism. Quote, a confirmation hearing answering hypothetical questions about the soundness of particular precedents is par for the course, end quote. It is par for the course because Americans want to know your legal positions on these issues, and they have a right to know. They deserve and need to know. And I am surprised, and I think a lot of Americans will be scared by the idea that people who want to simply marry or have a relationship with the person they love could find it criminalized, could find marriage equality cut back. I think it would be an America where I wouldn't want to live.
Well, Senator, to suggest that that's the kind of America I want to create isn't based in any facts in my record. And that quote that you read to me from the article talked about it being par for the course for those questions to be asked, but didn't say anything about whether it was appropriate for nominees to answer them.
Others have answered that same question, and I'm disappointed that you won't. Let me move on to another area. Last month, the New York Times published a series of bombshell reports dealing with the current state of the president's finances. There were a lot of revelations in that report, including that the president himself is responsible for loans totaling $421 million, most of which is coming due within 4 years. That amount of personal debt makes the president vulnerable to leverage, to manipulation, to coercion. His vulnerability makes him a threat to our national security. I'm not going to ask you about that aspect of his finances, or that he paid only $750 in income taxes in 2016 and 2017. I want to ask you about a fact that is critical constitutionally. During his first 2 years in office, the president received $73 million from foreign sources. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I just want to say I led a lawsuit involving 200 of my colleagues challenging the president's receipt of those foreign benefits and foreign payments as a violation of the Emoluments Clause. And we cited as well other payments and benefits that he received from India, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Qatar, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Slovakia, and Thailand, and more, in violation of the Emoluments Clause. And we've been talking a lot about originalism. The Emoluments Clause was the premier anti-corruption clause in the United States Constitution. As Edmund Randolph of Virginia said, specifically, the clause was intended to, quote, prevent corruption, end quote, by, quote, prohibiting anyone in office from receiving or holding any emoluments from foreign states, end quote. The lawsuit that I led was denied certiorari yesterday by the United States Supreme Court. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled against us on the limited technical issue of standing. It didn't deal with the merits. I hope that you will keep in mind the danger of corruption and the need to give citizens standing to enforce laws that prohibit corruption. Nobody is above the law. You've stated that position very well. And enforcement of laws that prevent corruption is vital. And my view is that the president, any president, must be held accountable. Do you agree?
No man is above the law. I agree with that, as I've stated very clearly before. And I also want to assure you, Senator Blumenthal, that I will apply all laws and come to an open mind with all laws, including laws dealing with anti-corruption.
Let me ask you about a topic that really hasn't arisen much here.
Okay.
Climate change. One of my colleagues, Senator Kennedy, asked you about it late in the hearing yesterday, and your answer was, quote, "You know, I'm not a scientist. I have read things about climate change. I would not say I have firm views on it." Do you believe that human beings cause global warming?
Well, Senator Blumenthal, I don't think I am competent to opine on what causes global warming or not. So
well, we all have views on it. I'm asking for your opinion.
I don't think that my views on global warming or climate change are relevant to the job I would do as a judge, nor do I feel like I have views that are informed enough, and I haven't studied scientific data. I'm not really in a position to offer any kind of informed opinion on what I think causes
I understand.
global
and again, I apologize for interrupting. Do you agree with the president on his views of climate change?
I don't know that I have seen the president's expression of his views on climate change.
Okay. Let me ask you on another area. Are you aware of the Supreme Court, as it's called, shadow docket?
I am.
Essentially, this docket consists of cases that are decided, often stays or extension of orders, without an opinion, correct?
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, in the denial of certiorari in Blumenthal versus Trump yesterday, there was no opinion providing the reasons why they did so. We don't even know how many justices supported the decision, except that there must have been at least 5. And despite detailed reasoning from lower courts, which we challenge, about the issues, there was no opinion. And the same was true of the census decision, as you know. So don't you think there should be transparency on the part of the Supreme Court?
I think that the court, in the practice of denying cert petitions routinely, and the shadow docket has become a hot topic in the last couple of years, but even when I was clerking on the court in 1998, it was not typical for the court to issue opinions explaining why cert was denied, although sometimes there are dissents from the denial of certiorari which have opinions. But as far as I know, it's never been the routine practice of the court to have opinions.
My time is limited, but I just want to leave you with the very strong message, because increasingly the court has turned to this shadow docket. In fact, it's growing larger. It's up to 6,000 cases every year where it rules without an opinion and without disclosing who voted which way. That strikes me as anti-democratic with a small d. It decides only about 80 cases on its merits docket every year, which is smaller than when I was a law clerk on the court, and probably when you were a law clerk as well. So fewer cases, accountable, and less transparency. I am going to conclude here. I just want to say we tried to bring into this room real people who are going to be affected by your decisions. Some of them will lose their coverage. In fact, millions of Americans, including Connor Curran, will lose his coverage under the Affordable Care Act if he's denied the protection to people with pre-existing conditions. Legislative activism from the bench and the kind of activism that I fear you will bring to the bench is one.
My clock is weird.
Well, there they go again. Audio problems for the folks on the floor there. Welcome to our world. That's what I'm going to tell them. Welcome to the world of live broadcast, boys and girls. It's not always smooth, is it, Tudor? But we work well. We have a great team here at Real America's Voice, and so, but we can appreciate. We've done this for a number of years. I've done it for lots of years, so they're having some problems. And Richard Blumenthal wrapping up and cutting her off. What did you make of it there?
Well, I think that he's trying to demonize her the best he can, and he's not winning, and that's frustrating for him. But man, she is really not going to break, and that I think is really frustrating for these Democrats. But like you said, these technical issues, they happen, and they seem to be frustrated by them. But, you know, we know how to deal with them. We know how to keep on going, and that's the benefit of you all being here with us on Real America's Voice. Make sure you are tuned into our show every day from 1 to 3, Monday through Friday. We love being here with you. We love bringing you the news every single day. And we really hope that we can get back to bringing you the news pretty quickly. I hope these hearings wrap up. I love watching what's happening, but I know there's a lot happening in the world as well. We want to bring that to you, especially with this election. But right now, we're going to send you over to Raheem Kassam. He has the National Pulse up for you next.
Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, Editor-in-Chief of thenationalpulse.com. Can we have a chat for a minute, please? Can we have a chat about what happened in Denver, please? Can we talk about how a man was murdered for his political preferences, and it has scarcely attracted a peep from the national media? Even Republican politicians have been relatively quiet about it. Let me guess. Marco Rubio found something about QAnon on his Facebook.